And this is Fox News Alert. Senator Ted Cruz is still making his case on the Senate floor about the need to defund Obamacare. Joining me now with reaction to this and much more, radio talk show host Dana Lash and Leslie Marshall. Good to see you both. Leslie, I'm going to start with you. As we watch this in the corner of our screen, and it's been going on for quite a while, I have no doubt it'll go on into the night. Gallup poll this week, Harry Reid, the most unpopular congressional leader. Gallup poll, Americans' belief in government that it's too powerful is at a record level. Number 3, Charlie Cook has something that ought to concern Democrats, is that the 2014 midterms look better for Republicans than they did in 2010 as independents are tilting Republican by 18 points. Now, this is all coming out the same week all this is going on with health care. If you're a Democrat, what do you make of that?
Well, I love how you cite a few polls. I have some polls for you, but I'm not going to go through list by list. The American people, although they're not in favor of Obamacare, have also said they're not in favor of holding it up in a threat to defund the government as bait in Congress. The American people did not send Democrats or Republicans to Washington to do this and to go back to undo legislation. The American people, I think, tomorrow might vote Ted Cruz to be the most unpopular person as opposed to Harry Reid.
I think he's one of the most popular, actually. Now, probably polarizing. Dana?
It might change tomorrow. Yeah. It will change tomorrow.
I have some polls, too. In fact, up on my phone, I have the average from RCP, Real Clear Politics, of I don't know how many polls that we could list, and it shows that the unpopularity of Obamacare has never dropped below 51%. In fact, it is still considered to be at an all-time high, and the only time that it has ever been this high, or has ever dropped low, in fact, was when it was out of the spotlight. But no, it's always been unpopular. It was crammed down everyone's throats. I completely understand why Harry Reid is so unpopular. He's a negative guy. He's a negative Nancy. It's negativity, lie. Look, Sean, you're not going to be able to front what's in someone's paycheck. You're not going to be able to front what's in someone's bank account. People know how much money they have to spend. They're getting notices from their employers. They're seeing how Obamacare is affecting them. In fact, just next month, the VP of the company that owns my radio station is coming into town to tell us about some really negative impacts that Obamacare is going to have on my health insurance. You can't fake people out of that. That's the truth, and they're reacting to it.
You know, let me go through some of this. Leslie, Walgreens dropping health care coverage, 160,000 employees. SeaWorld, if you work part-time, you can't work more than 28 hours, all impacted by Obamacare. Cleveland Clinic, they're going to cut their workforce by 5 to 6%. They cite Obamacare. Independent Business Daily, 300 employees that they've surveyed have cut hours for jobs, and that includes 80 school districts, 46 universities, 239 public sector sections of the economy. So all of these companies are saying the same thing. This is hurting us. This is stopping them from hiring full-time people. This is taking away health care coverage. Why not stop, hit the pause button at the very least, and at least look at the negative impact it's having?
Well, first of all, this is legislation, as you know, that was passed years ago, and up until now there was no alternative that was presented by the Republicans. Because Sean, you do not just stop and say when the majority of those in the voter population voted for this president not once but twice, and although you may say the majority of Americans don't now want Obamacare, that is one of the reasons they voted for the president, is because that was his platform, was to have universal health coverage.
This has
Some
become
that
a
are
nightmare.
not in favor of Obamacare
then why is
on the
it
left
unpopular?
is because they don't feel it goes far enough. Because many people on the left don't feel it goes far enough. They wanted a single payer plan. They wanted the public option.
Then why doesn't it poll better?
Those on the left, absolutely.
Right, let's go to
it does
Dana.
if you break it down.
Sean, there was something that Leslie had said earlier about a poll. This is from the National Journal. Everybody's spinning the 6 ways to Sunday, and they're spinning it wrong. When you talk about the majority of Americans who don't want to, who are talking about they don't want to shut down government over Obamacare. They're not. They want to see. If you look at this National Journal poll, and if you accurately break it out and employ sentient human reading comprehension, what you will see is that people want it decoupled. They want to talk about a budget. First and foremost, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if Democrats in the Senate had done their job and passed a budget, so we didn't have to do continuing resolution after continuing resolution. But that's another discussion that I'm sure that they do not want to broach tonight, considering the polls. But if you talk, people who were polled in this National Journal poll, Sean, they want to decouple it. They want to deal with Obamacare, then they want to deal with with the government shutdown. They want to deal with the budget separately. It's not that they don't want it together. That's what the poll was about, and that's what's being miscited because it implicates Democrats.
We got to take a break. We'll come back. Dana and Leslie will stay with us after the break. We'll continue with radio talk show host Dana Lash and Leslie Marshall. You know, CBO came out with numbers last week, Leslie, and says basically we're on a path to bankruptcy with this. $641 billion in new taxes over the 10-year period. And Forbes magazine came out, and instead of saving $2,500 on average per family as the president sold it, they're going to spend $7,450 a year more than they're spending now. Does any of this have any impact on you, or are you just a rigid ideologue with blinders on? And you can't, well, I'm asking because does these
You know facts, I'm not a rigid ideologue.
So what is?
First
so
of
then
all,
what?
you know that I own a medical center. You know that my husband's a physician.
So then help
and let me tell you why we need this. And I want to speak to jobs first because Dana got to and I didn't.
I don't need your
reason. I want to speak to jobs first.
No, I don't want. I didn't ask you that.
The Department of Labor report shows that we have more jobs being created in the private sector, and this is not a job killer.
All right. You can give me all the talking points you want, but I ask you a specific question. $7,450 more. The president said we'd save $2,500 a year. Does that not, that's a $10,000 swing. Help me out, Leslie. Why doesn't that have an impression on you?
Well, certainly that has an impression on me, Sean, but it doesn't mean that you throw out the baby with the bathwater. It doesn't mean that you stand there and that you copy Wendy Davis and try and top 10 hours and 45 minutes when you don't have the votes.
Babies
the
thrown
reality
out with the bathwater.
is you had years ago to present an alternative plan. This reminds me of toddlers like I have lying on the floor, kicking and screaming because they can't get their way and crying over spilt milk. This is not about the American people. This is about the Tea Party and not being a Republican. The Republican Party is not even with Ted Cruz on this one.
And I think it's really funny that she mentioned baby and bathwater, and here she was talking about Wendy Davis, who was talking about killing babies, I guess, instead of throwing them out with the bathwater. But, you know, I digress. I don't know why it doesn't have an impact on these individuals. Sean, I've been storifying all of these tweets from average Americans all across the country who have been talking about how Obamacare is having such a negative impact on them. They're talking about their premiums increasing. They're talking about losing coverage. I've heard from cancer survivors. Sean, I've heard from women who are actually talking about whether or not they want to have children, more children or any children, because they're worried about the costs associated with labor and delivery. And in fact, I'm one of those women who's contemplating whether or not that's going to be in my cards because I have no idea what the affordability of health care is going to be.
You know, $10,000, you know, I remember my years in construction. I remember my years in the restaurant business. I remember my struggling years as a local radio host making 19 grand a year. You know what? That'd be half my salary, you know, if I had a family of four. You know, even the New York Times, I know liberals love it. Even they say we'll have very limited doctor choices. You have the Mayo Clinic CEO talking about the negatives of Obamacare. All of this empirical data and the fact that there are exclusive exemptions for the right people, like big business and members of Congress, none of it impacts the thought process of the left. And I don't understand that, Leslie, because you are in real life a very reasonable person. $10,000 for an average family of four is a lot of money.
Well, yes, it is. There's no question about that. And this is one of the reasons that I am not in favor of the way the Affordable Care Act was passed or in its current form. And I said that before on your program.
But you're not supporting stopping it.
One of the problems with this is well, no, because it shouldn't be stopped. We need to go further. One of the huge problems in our country, Sean, and my husband can tell you, is that people come to him when their people come to him when their bones are sticking out of their legs, as opposed to when they had a pain and it could have been prevented. This cost a lot of money, and I'm not talking about money in his pocket. I'm talking about money for the American taxpayer.
That doesn't make sense. Why would you want to push
the emergency rooms? And that was part of the problem.
They've already admitted that it's failed.
Because we're not preventative with our health care.
They already admitted that it's failed because of all the waivers. 1,200 plus waivers, Leslie. They already admitted that it's failed. They already admitted that it's failed, that it's not going to work. What the Republicans want to do is make those waivers permanent for everyone, not just for Congress and not just for businesses that support this administration. Be intellectually honest, Leslie. You were there for just a second. Bring that tugboat to shore, Leslie. Bring that tugboat to shore.
Oh, boy. Let's go back to Ted Cruz. Thank you both.
Bring the tugboats to shore.
Take a look at Ted Cruz, please.